We've got a trio of sell candidates who don't follow the same Dynasty fantasy football formula. One is coming off a tremendous season and remains a potentially dominant backfield leader. Another is a second-year running back who dramatically outproduced expectations as a rookie. And the last, well, I'll just say that you're probably not going to like it. Even Jared doesn't like the pick. Are you going to take his side, or will my case convince you? Let's find out. Matt Schaff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here to reveal 3 sell candidates for your Dynasty Fantasy Football League. And Jared, we all want to sell off guys we think are about to bust, but you can't always just focus on that. Sometimes you need to trade away players who will continue to deliver some value because that improves your chances of getting better value in return. I'd say 2 of the 3 guys that we're going to talk about fit that mold, and that includes one of your top candidates, Packers running back Josh Jacobs. Why are you selling him?
Last year just couldn't have gone better. He stayed healthy, which is not easy to do as any running back in the NFL, especially one getting the type of volume that Jacobs did last year. Marshawn Lloyd, their round 3 rookie last year, who we expected to maybe have a role, did not stay healthy at all last year. He had a hell of a time with all sorts of different issues. And then you had the Packers go extremely run heavy last year. The Packers finished 3rd in run rate last year. So yeah, everything kind of came together for Jacobs to have this really strong 2024 fantasy season. The first reason I think he's a sell is just betting against that happening again, right? It's tough for a running back to, 1, get that many touches in today's NFL, and 2, stay healthy doing it. So I kind of want to fade the chances that it happen again. I think the chances of it not happening again are raised by the fact that, again, over 340 regular season touches for Jacobs last year. We saw him do that back in 2022 with the Raiders, and the next season was really rough for Jacobs. He missed 4 games. Averaged just 3.5 yards per carry, finishes like a mid-range RB2 in fantasy points. And now he's 2 years older. He's 27 years old now. That's not quite inside the danger zone yet for running backs, but it's getting close to that point. So like if Jacobs just disappoints at all this year, you're talking about a guy who's dynasty owners are not going to want to touch at that point. If he's 28 coming off a disappointing season, like that asset has almost no value. So I just think now is likely the highest Jacobs' dynasty value is going to be for the rest of his career. So unless you need him to compete this year, if you can afford to sell him in any way, I think now is probably the time you're going to maximize value by doing so.
Yeah, we talk about that historical aging curve, and there are certain inflection points like the age 29 season for running backs we talked about, like the early peak for running backs that we talked about, but there are also nuances within. And yeah, age 27 season is not worrisome range yet, but it is past peak historically for running backs. So if there is any bad injury luck this season for Josh Jacobs, it could affect his outlook beyond that. He is signed through 2027 right now, but 2026, so the other side of this season, holds a jump in his cap hit for the Packers, a $14.6 million cap hit in 2026. If they keep him around, they would get about $8 million in cap savings if they dump him ahead of that 2026 season. So, we'll see how this year plays out and whether he gets dumped, but there's at least that potential after this season for him that's not there right now. And that could affect his outlook. If he is at that point, heading into his age 28 season, coming off what would probably have been a disappointing 2025, it's going to be tougher for him to find a lead job. So I think there is some potential for Josh Jacobs to fall off come 2026 versus where he is right now. At the moment, to be fair, I think he's kind of fairly valued on the market. He's RB13 on DLF. He's RB14 on Keep Trade Cut. He's RB11 among the Fantasy Pros consensus. I think that's fair. I also don't think he's going to climb above that. So make sure you're getting a good deal. But I agree that it's a good time to look into selling Josh Jacobs, really for the same reasons that I said before, that I'm not really targeting him in drafts right now.
Yeah, RB15 in our dynasty running back rankings right now. So again, not way off, but below all those other ranking sources you mentioned.
And the higher you get in the rankings, the more those tiny gaps matter, of course. Tyrone Tracy, second on our list of sells here. And Jared, he's sitting in the RB20 to RB23 range across the sites we've been talking about. I don't want to focus too much on those because market value is tough to gauge in dynasty. And really all it matters is how the person that you're trying to trade with values that player. So if you know that they use a specific source, feel free to look at that. Otherwise, just take a shot and see how they value that player because they might not be looking at any outside source. So Tyrone Tracy comes into his second season after having taken over the Giants backfield from Devin Singletary as a rookie. Production was excellent versus expectation heading into the year, but the performance wasn't really anything special in any particular area other than taking over the lead job. The Giants should draft somebody this year. So To me, Jared, this is a guy that I would try to sell now because he could look much different a month from now.
Yeah, for sure. And this one hurts because we loved Tracy last year as a sleeper in that running back class. So I'm sure plenty of Draft Sharks insiders have them on dynasty teams. I do think now is a time to at least consider cashing in those chips. It just feels like a potential rug pull situation for Tracy, who is only a 5th round pick. Expecting them to add a running back again. We'll see what round that comes in, what caliber of running back we're talking about. But yeah, Matt, you mentioned fantasy production last year was nice. His performance wasn't that good. Among 47 running backs with 90 plus carries last year, he was just 35th in yards after contact per attempt, 33rd in rush yards over expected per attempt. And then even as a pass catcher, this was surprising to me because, Tracy, obviously a former wide receiver, again, put up nice raw pass catching production last year. If we look at yards per route run, just 29th among 37 qualifying running backs. PFF receiving grade, just 35th among those 37 qualifying running backs. To me, he didn't do enough from a real life play perspective, have that lead job locked in. It would not surprise me at all if the Giants are looking to maybe not even upgrade from him, but just add competition, add someone to, share the work with him. And I kind of expect that to happen in the draft. If that happens, I think you're going to see his dynasty value take a hit from where it is now.
Now, of course, to be fair, he was a rookie. He's physically gifted. He certainly could improve on all of those things. A couple years ago, I was pointing out how Chuba Hubbard was not that good, and he has gotten better over the past couple of seasons and become a guy that we want on fantasy teams. The issue here is that Tyrone Tracy currently stands as the lead back for the Giants, but he looks much more like a complementary back, like somebody who should share the backfield with somebody. And we're coming up to a point where the Giants could take a running back in any range and dramatically change the way things look there, potentially even making Tyrone Tracy the RB2. So that's why I think it makes sense to go ahead and try to make a move. I also think that Tyrone Tracy represents an archetype that's really good to consider selling in general, is that day 3, especially running back who shows out as a rookie, dramatically outperforms what we all expected from him. That guy we're always excited about heading into year 2. There are many examples looking back, though, of players who just never matched that going forward. If you just always sell that player type heading into year 2, of course, every once in a while, you're going to miss Arian Foster, but overall, you're going to profit on that move.
Yeah, we see these guys a lot of times just never match that level of play or just straight out get replaced, right? Like Trey Mason's guy I always think of, who had great rookie season for the Rams, and they draft Todd Gurley in the first round the following season. So yeah, again, I don't expect the Giants to do that. Just how the NFL operates, I think you're going to see competition for Tracy get added in the draft next month.
But even guys like Alfred Morris was never as productive in his first season. Steve Slayton was a 3rd round pick, but similar kind of thing for the Texans. And, those are just like off the top of our head guys. Like there are plenty of other players, if you look back, that fit. Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers. It's just a player archetype that you should consider selling ahead of year 2. The last guy on this list is the contentious one, and it's Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the Chiefs. I totally understand why people would be excited about him heading into this season. And let me just start by saying I don't dislike Xavier Worthy. What I dislike is the valuation on him. And I think that there's a chance we're near where his peak is going to be in terms of market value. Now, he's wide receiver 17 on Dynasty League Football, wide receiver 21 on Keep Trade Cut. I think it's interesting to note that he's wide receiver 27 in the Fantasy Pros consensus. So that's just a sampling of Dynasty rankers. Maybe that rises a lot if you sample different rankers. And I think it's going to vary quite a bit site to site, person to person. So you have to get a good return to trade Xavier Worthy. I'm not saying give up on him now before he crashes. Now, this is why I think we might be at a potential value high point for him. He's 5'11", 165 pounds as a prospect. So not wide receiver 1 size for the NFL. Really good college numbers overall, but his terrific freshman year market shares came back to the pack over the next 2 years. His rookie season in the NFL, wide receiver 33 in total PPR points, wide receiver 41 in points per game. Between college and the rookie year pro numbers, I think we're just setting up for a guy that's not an alpha receiver, and I don't think has that path to him. Even if we look at the week 7 on period from his rookie season, which was post-bye, no Rashee Rice, other limitations in the Chiefs passing game where he's getting more targets, wide receiver 28 in PPR over that span. So we're taking that scoring profile from last year and making him wide receiver 16, 17 right now in dynasty rankings. He's wide receiver 15 on our dynasty trade value chart at the moment, if you're looking at PPR rankings, by the way. And I think that's what my issue is, not with Xavier Worthy, the player, but with Xavier Worthy, the current valuation, he's sitting in between T. Higgins and Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, we'll see what Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to do over the next few years. But to me, he's the type of player that does have that alpha number one receiver potential to him. To me, Worthy belongs down in the range more with Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, Jalen Waddle. Very good players, just not guys with that number one wide receiver upside. And I think currently the market and our numbers at the moment are treating Xavier Worthy like somebody that has that true wide receiver one upside in his future.
I think where we'll agree is that Worthy is probably not like a perennial top 6, top 8 fantasy wide receiver because of that size, but he's not being valued as that. He's sitting in, mid-range wide receiver 2 territory in the Dynasty rankings. And we're talking about a young player who should still be ascending and who has a, long shelf life. So I think he should probably even be priced like above his fantasy production as far as Dynasty ranking goes, right? Because of the longevity you're going to get with someone like that. I kind of think you're overthinking this one a little bit is my thing. Like we're talking about a first round NFL draft pick who's not even 22 years old yet, who produced as at least a low end wide receiver 2 over the second half of his rookie season. He was a top 12 fantasy wide receiver over his final 3 games. And then he had 287 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. I think, that should definitely not be overlooked. The fact that he had a huge postseason. Worthy obviously is tied to Patrick Mahomes for at least the life of his rookie contract. We'll see beyond that. And then you just look at, the supporting cast. Obviously, Rashee Rice is likely there for the, long term, at least the next handful of years. But Hollywood Brown only signed a 1-year deal. Travis Kelce is a year-to-year proposition at this point. So like even by the time we get to 2026, it could be like Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy as the clear top 2 options in this Patrick Mahomes led passing game. So I don't think Worthy's a buy because again, I think where his price is about right. We're a little ahead of market, but not bigly ahead of market. But he's not someone I'm looking to sell. Just he's the type of profile that I think is gonna at least be like a weekly wide receiver 2 for fantasy teams for the next handful of years.
Did you just say bigly?
Bigly.
I think that you're underthinking this one because my whole issue with him is market price. And we've got him, 25% more valuable than Jordan Addison, nearly 25% more valuable than Devontae Smith in our own numbers, and more than 25% more valuable than Jalen Waddle. To me, that's what he is. I don't think that he has upside beyond where he's priced right now. And I know that if he stays there, fine, he's valued appropriately. I don't think he stays there. I think he should be down in that range where those guys are. And if he were sitting, right next to Jordan Addison, Jalen Waddle, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Those are first round picks as well. Those are guys who have already produced in the league. And those are guys who look like they're going to stay complementary wide receiver pieces as opposed to players who are going to score like wide receiver 16 on an annual basis. I think that's where we differ. I think you look at Worthy and see wide receiver 16-ish year to year. I look at Worthy and I see wide receiver 22 to 24-ish year to year, like maybe Terry McLaurin going forward.
Yeah, that would be one difference. And I think compared to those other guys, I think one, Worthy as Patrick Mahomes, which is just nice. 2, I do think, at least in the case of someone like Addison, like he's not going to be his team's number 1 wide receiver, where I do think, I'm not saying Worthy's ever going to be a, 28% target share guy, but I think he could be a, 24% target share guy, especially once, Travis Kelce is out of the picture for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I would say all of that is why I would not just sell Xavier Worthy for whatever you can get. He's totally a sell if you can get a very good return player. And if not, hang on to him, because I certainly don't think he's going to crash. I think he's going to be helpful in fantasy going forward. I just think that we might be at a value high point. But, we'll see. That's why we have discussions like this. It's also why we have tools like the Trade Navigator, because that is ready to help guide you through the entire Dynasty trade process. You sync your own league. It'll help you find the perfect trade partner, craft the ideal trade package, and assess incoming offers to see whether they make sense for your team, and not just leave you working off of your feelings about certain players and wondering if it's the right valuation for your specific format. It's just one among our entire suite of Dynasty tools ready to help you at DraftSharks.com. If you're playing Dynasty Fantasy Football, we want to be your unfair advantage.